The answer to the question is a hard no. I probably should have taken my own advice years ago when I bought all of this. Let's explore. The question is should you stack copper bullion? And of course, the answer would be no for a myriad of different reasons. But I tell you, as the price of copper is reaching record highs, it is something that has been asked more frequently as of late on this channel. We're going to discuss some of the reasons why you should not do it, but also why we should be open-minded to potentially stacking copper bullion in the future. First, let's talk a little bit about the price of copper. Many people don't realize this, but copper is actually priced in pounds, not ounces. It's at almost near record highs. I'll talk about the price of copper here later on, but nonetheless, we've seen this happen a couple of times in the history of copper prices, but they are now up at levels that people are thinking maybe it's a good idea to accumulate copper bullion, because it's a lot cheaper than silver, but still it's a lot more expensive than silver in terms of premiums. And you're not going to get those premiums back if you go to sell. Copper, as you know, in the form of bullion is, you have a pound. This is a pound of copper and a copper bar, a very nice piece. And I bought all of this stuff mainly, not necessarily to stack it because it was kind of cool. For those of you who follow my channel, I like heavy metal of all sorts. And, a pound of copper it's pretty nice to have and pretty cool. And it's heavy, it feels good in the hand. It's a little bit of a dirty metal. As you can see, it tarnishes in different ways and shapes and forms. But it is a pretty cool looking metal. And let's take a look at another piece here. This is a kilo of copper. And there you can see it. 1 kilo. This is a really thick piece from what's known as the metal mint. And there's a couple of refineries and copper bullion producers that aren't around anymore, but you can buy copper rounds of various different styles, but they are weighed usually in what are known as avitoporous ounces. That's AV ounce. That stands for avitoporous ounces, which is 28 and some odd grams, 28.4 grams, I believe, or 8 grams. And that's how copper is measured, whereas precious metals are measured in troy ounces. There's AVDP ounce, 1 copper troy ounce bar. You can even get it in bullet form. And it's fun to have these pieces in your collection, but you should look at them as just for fun. They're not really going to preserve your wealth, especially with the high prices now, but even as such, the premiums just kind of kill it for stacking copper. It's nice to have complement pieces to some of your silver stacking, or for collecting, you get a silver version, and usually there's a copper version that you can get as well. Obviously these copper rounds, at $2 a pop, it seems, hey, that's a pretty good deal. Wasn't long ago when you can get them for $1 a round. But here we are. Inflation affects even the production of copper. But it is not really for stacking. The best way to really stack copper is to buy it on the cheap, like this, pre-82 Lincoln cent. There's benefits to stacking Lincoln cents. They only cost a penny. I don't like to use the term penny because pennies aren't used in the United States of America, even though the U.S. Mint has used that term incorrectly for a couple of years now. These are cents, not pennies, but you can accumulate them for 1 cent a piece. The only downside is you're not supposed to melt these down. But any Lincoln cent that you get before 1982, this is the kind of copper to stack, not this. You're paying a whole lot more for this than you are for this. You're getting copper for under spot when you save your Lincoln cents and your change. And I've started doing that again, but you should not, I repeat, you should not stack copper. But again, there's nothing wrong with collecting it. And I did, and I still will buy some pieces, not nearly as much, but from time to time to complement other collectible pieces in the collection to have to complement, and just for the fun of it. You know, it's always good to buy some things just for the fun of it, and copper bullion is one of those. In time, we very well could see the price go up. There's a lot of ways to invest in the metal down the road, and I'm going to talk to Mr Saxon, who is a copper expert and precious metals expert and geologist out of Australia in the sponsored portion of the video. So I hope you will enjoy as we talk about copper prices and the future of where copper is going, because one day I believe that copper prices could climb enough that it may be beneficial to stack copper, but we are a long ways off from that time. I have with me Mr. Saxon, who has 30 years of experience in exploration and resource geology, with the past decade in CEO and leadership roles. After graduating from the University of Melbourne in 1991 with a first-class Bachelor of Science and honors in geology, he has worked globally with the leading major and minor resource companies. He brings a very strong record of discovery with Tasman Metals Limited, Mawson Gold Limited, Tinker Resources Limited, and leading edge materials across rare earth elements, lithium, base metals, and gold. So welcome, Mr. Saxon.
Sal, thank you very much, and I hope you're not making me sound too old with that introduction. Time goes fast.
It sure does, and that's quite a lot of experience you have there. And I tell you what, a lot of these metals, the rare earths, lithium, copper, silver, and gold, they have been in the news a lot lately. There's a lot of buzz around them. And,
yeah, absolutely. And I guess I look back at my career there as you run through it, and yeah, really, it's been that shift I've seen from, I guess, yeah, let's call them the traditional metals, which was zinc and iron and copper and gold, and yeah, far more focused now, I guess, onto the next generation of metals, which is lithium and rare earths and cobalt and copper and the things that I guess the world needs more of in the future.
One thing that I find fascinating, especially with copper, is its price performance over the last couple of decades here. In fact, I go back, I remember around 2006 through about 2008, right before the recession hit, and the recession hit hard, you started to see the price really pop out to almost $4 a pound. And then the recession hit and it kind of dipped down fairly dramatically. But during that time, you started to see actually quite a bit of copper bullion being sold for people that usually collect gold and silver. And it seems like, you know, copper was now an option for folks. And then in 2011, when we saw silver spike up to, you know, near record highs, close to $50 an ounce, well, then you saw again copper break out. 2011 was the time for copper, and we saw a lot more copper bullion being sold then. Fast forward to here, 2023, here's where we're at now again. And right now, as I record this video, it's at $4.26 per pound. We're at those same record highs. It's amazing to see.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess, yeah, copper has the two strands, I suppose. So in part, it's an industrial metal and it will be bought and consumed very quickly. It goes into really every kind of electrical device you can imagine. So automotive, energy, everything relies on copper. So yeah, I guess you can, there's a component of GDP, I guess, that's built into the copper price. And as GDP grows, then the copper price grows. But then, yeah, also there's a lot of forward buying when people feel insecure about future demand for copper. Then, yeah, people get out and buy copper and stockpile it for future use. And I guess we see that in the cycles of the copper price. And as you say, we're now reaching very close to record prices. And so I think the price where copper sits at the moment, there's only been maybe 6 months in the last 20 years that it's exceeded these prices. So it's a really healthy market for copper at the moment.
And people don't understand, why is copper priced in pounds compared to ounces?
Yeah, I guess because, and again, it comes back to being an industrial metal rather than a precious metal. And so, yeah, and then certainly for my thinking, and yeah, I'm Australian, obviously, as you can hear in my accent, that I think in tons rather than pounds. And really, when you speak to the major customers, they're speaking in tons. They're buying very large amounts of copper. So at the moment, the total world copper market is about 25 million tons or something like that. So if you measured that in ounces, it'd be a very big number and perhaps a little bit overwhelming for the customer.
A lot of it really does, and you alluded to this, rely on demand. Demand is driving a lot of this, and we're seeing
electric vehicles starting to become more prominent on our roadways, and people talk about silver being needed for electric vehicles, but there's no question that there's going to need a lot more copper for those than silver.
Oh, absolutely. And when you look out at the forecast, I guess, for the increase in demand in copper, then it's really quite stunning. It's an extra 50% on the copper that we use today. And in fact, you look at the numbers, and really between today and say 2030, we've got to be producing about as much copper as the world has produced in all of its history to support the energy transition. And really, I guess, the energy transition had a bit of a slow start, and really it was the Dieselgate crisis, I guess, that happened in Europe with Volkswagen that really was the big push. And now we're seeing, I guess, renewable power, we're seeing electric transport, we're seeing the Internet of Things. All of that is really heavy demand for copper, and so the demand side is really strong. And then if you look back at the supply side as well, we just haven't seen many major copper discoveries over the last sort of 10 or 20 years. So yeah, there's been lots of really interesting projects, but there's been no hero, I guess, that's been discovered. And so where, as we look forward over the next sort of 20 or 30 years, then the demand is massive and the supply is tight. So kind of means price is going to go up.
And, I always tell folks that ask me, well, should you stack copper bars and rounds? I always tell them no. It's fine to collect them for fun, and I've got some of them, but I typically do not stack them. But nonetheless, there may come a time when the price of them goes up, then it may become a viable option to stack, because the premiums that are tied to those are mostly related to manufacturing of those products and services, and it's just the premiums far outweigh the spot price per ounce, because that's how we think of accumulating and stacking bullion.
No, exactly, and I would agree with that. If you can afford the storage cost, I suppose. So yeah, because you're dealing with bulky materials, then storage is a great opportunity for people who can afford that. And if you can't and you want to be still playing the market, there's lots of other smart ways through junior companies or through senior companies, the producers as well, with a big exposure to copper, and really they move in line with the copper price, and there's loads of other fundamentals as well. But as copper price moves up, those companies will move up as well.
And most are predicting a commodity boom, and copper will certainly be part of that and drive that very heavily. Speaking of the mining sector, this is an area that you have great expertise, especially with your background and geology and your experience with a lot of these companies. What are you seeing as far as copper mining in general?
Yeah, I think the copper market already is quite a large market, and so we're building at the moment from being a large solid market into a much bigger market, and so I think that gives the industry a lot of stability. And so when you look at, say, the copper pricing, then you can develop a curve and you can be sort of reasonably predictive on the supply and demand curve, which is a little bit different, I suppose, when you look at what's happening in some of the minor metals. Lithium and rare earths, for example, they're much smaller markets, and really they're going from being tiny markets to mid-sized markets, and so they've got a lot of volatility built in as those markets kind of establish themselves. But the copper market, the production is quite well known, the demand is quite well known, the major suppliers is quite well known. So I think what we can do is come up with quite a predictive market, and that feeds through into price. So at the moment, the US is a good producer of copper, and South America is a very major producer of copper. Canada, Australia are modest, and some African countries. But I guess part of the story now is as we move into this energy transition and are more reliant on copper and metals, then I think there's a great shift to be more transparent in mining and bring mining back into countries like the US and Canada, where the supply chains are shorter, the supply is more secure. This whole supply chain crisis that's affecting us globally and flowing through into inflation, that's part of that is caused by these long and complex supply chains and materials coming from countries where the supply is a little bit uncertain and sort of politically difficult, perhaps. So I think, a lot of supply coming back into countries like, European countries. Sweden's a big one. The US and Canada, Australia, I think they've all got great opportunities to be bigger suppliers of copper in the short to medium terms.
And that's kind of where you're coming in with your initiative, because you want to start to try to find copper in some of these areas to help mitigate some of the supply chain issues. Can you talk a little bit about your initiatives there?
Yeah, absolutely. And on behalf of T2 Metals Corp, I'm sitting at the moment in Beatty, Nevada, as we talked about, and looking at some projects in this region, and we're drilling a copper project not too far from town here, and really, I guess the vision that I see and what's important in the future of copper is shortening the supply chains, having discoveries in regions where they can be developed. So in mining districts like Nevada is a perfect example of that, where if you find something, then there's a very good chance you can develop it, which is great. And by producing in these regions, they can be entirely US made, I suppose, or North American made. It can come from the US or Canada and supply into, say, the automotive market in Detroit, and provide a very short, secure supply chain. And really, the whole world is seeking those things at the moment. And to disconnect a little, I guess, from the influence of Chinese demand. And I think Chinese investment is very strong in the copper market, and that's going ahead, say, particularly in African countries. The US and Canada and Australia and Europe are trying to disconnect a little from those Chinese supply chains now, and find their own sources, find their own supply, and rely on their own technologies and people, and add value locally. I think that's the motive that most countries are trying to achieve at the moment, and mining is no different.
Right. I think that's amazing and excellent. I think that's the way it should go with a lot of different things, not just in this sector. But well, that's wonderful. So you have already been started exploration and some drilling, from what I understand.
Yeah, that's correct. So when you think about, I guess, the exploration cycle, so T2 is a Canadian company, TSX listed. TWO is our code. We've been exploring in North America for a number of years now, and identified a number of locations that we really like, and so we start the process with sampling at the surface. We then do what's called geophysical measurements, and that kind of gives us a bit of an indication of what sits beneath the ground. And then the next step is drilling, where we use a drill rig and physically bore a hole in the ground and take a look what's there. So that's the stage we're at the moment with our project here in Nevada. Quite soon after, we're moving down to Arizona, and Arizona has many major copper mines, and some of the largest in the world are in Arizona, and so we'll be moving down there to a project that we have. And coming into the summer, we'll be moving. We've got a project in Arizona where we've got known copper resources, and doing additional work there in Manitoba and Canada. Quite close to the town of Flin Flon, which has a copper smelter in it already. So we're spreading the risk across those jurisdictions and I guess different environments, and got opportunity in all those locations to make a discovery.
Wonderful. Sounds very exciting. So how can people reach out to you?
So our website's the obvious way, and t2metals.com is obviously an easy way to get at us. Quite active on Twitter and LinkedIn and other places. I can be reached msaxon@t2metals.com is a great way to reach me, and happy to engage with everyone and talk about the industry in general and the work we're doing specifically in T2. And I'm very fortunate to be CEO of a company that's sitting in an important sector at an important time, and with a good team around me. So very happy to always talk about it.
It's a good way to invest in a copper mining company that is local on this side of the world. It's exciting and amazing to see that this is moving forward, and it'll be very fascinating to see the drilling results and what you've done there. So moving to Arizona next, it sounds great.
It's a great industry, and a very a critical part of US industry and North American industry is the mining industry. So it's a great thing to be part of.
Well, very good. Great. Is there anything else you want to share with us with regards to copper or maybe even lithium?
I certainly have plenty of investments in lithium and rare earths and copper, and they've all had very strong years, and I think the outlook for all those markets is great, and maybe we'll see the US dollar will ease a little bit, and that is very good for commodities over the next 12 months or even longer. So I'm seeing a very positive year for commodities.
Sounds good. Well, Mr. Saxon, thank you so much for sharing your expertise on copper and copper mining. This has been wonderful. So thank you so much again. So I want to thank all of you for taking the time to watch this video, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.